Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to welcome you to the second plenary of the U20 Summit in São Paulo. My name is Ilan Cooperstein, and I am the C40 Regional Director for Latin America. Today, I have the pleasure to chair the session on one of the three priorities of this year's U20 cycle, sustainable development and the just energy transition. I have three esteemed speakers joining me this afternoon, including Vice Mayor Kim Sang-han of Seoul, Borough Mayor Laurence Lavigne-Lalonde, member of the Executive Committee and Mayor for Montreal's Villeray-Saint-Michel Parc Extension, and Deputy Mayor Harkirat Singh of Brampton. Thank you all so much for joining us here today in São Paulo. The format of today's panel will be as follows. We will have 30 minutes for the high-level panel. After this, we will open the floor for discussion and invite any of you that would like to intervene with questions or reflections to raise your hand. We will then have about 20 minutes for this conversation, after which we will close the session. As you all know, at C40 Cities, climate is our main focus. We know that climate change is one of the biggest challenges our world has ever faced. That said, we are at a critical moment with the world on track to exceed the 1.5 goal that the Paris Agreement set as its most ambitious target within the next few years. Mayors are at the forefront of confronting this challenge, tackling this climate crisis, and protecting their communities from its impacts while promoting inclusivity and a just transition. None of us can fight climate change alone. As U20 cities and beyond, we have an opportunity to demonstrate to national governments that cities are committed to working together with national leaders to enable better, more ambitious, and people-centered climate action and leverage the true potential of local climate leadership. To avert climate breakdown, we need coordinated partnerships between all levels of government. To enable better, more ambitious, and people-centered climate action. And so I turn to my panel of climate leaders to hear from them. I would like to invite Vice Mayor Kim Sang-han of Seoul to take the floor. Vice Mayor, perhaps you can start off by sharing your perspective on the panel's topic, which reads, what does sustainable development and the just energy transition mean to you as a city leader? Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I am Kim Sang-han, the Vice Mayor of Seoul. Firstly, I am delighted to meet the mayors of U20 chair cities, Mr. Eduardo Paes, Mayor of Rio, and Mr. Ricardo Nunes, Mayor of São Paulo, along with the mayors, representatives of the other cities, C40, UCLG, and other stakeholders. I am honored to be here to deliberate on the challenges facing our cities and explore the way forward in Brazil, where the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in Rio was held 30 years ago, marking the onset of the global commitment to sustainable development. Seoul wholeheartedly supports the U20 communique's value for the social inclusion, sustainable development, and global cooperation, and Seoul will persist in its endeavors in this direction. The city of Seoul places a premium on the ethos of the going together with the socially neglected, and Seoul is actively implementing diverse policy initiatives to tackle pressing issues such as livelihood, education, and climate for sustainable development. In particular, Seoul has developed the index of GTSN, going together with the socially neglected, which is designed to evaluate the performance of the programs and serve as guiding tools for the policy development. This index comprises 50 indicators across 6 key areas, including livelihood, housing, healthcare, and education, will be useful in reducing societal inequality, enhancing citizens' quality of life, shaping policy directions, and optimizing budget management. Furthermore, Seoul is committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 and fostering a climate-resilient city. In 2022, Seoul unveiled the 2050 Seoul Climate Action Plan with the aim of achieving carbon neutrality neutrality by 2050, which received the international endorsement from C40. In order to ease the use of passenger cars, the climate card was introduced earlier this year, allowing unlimited use of the buses, subways, and the public bicycles on a monthly basis. In addition, Seoul has been implementing various policies to address the climate crisis, including accelerating the decarbonization of the buildings and phasing out the internal combustion engines and becoming an ecologically sustainable water cycling city. I am heartened by the finalization of the U20 Joint Declaration during this meeting, underscoring meaningful discussion on fostering inclusive, healthy society, sustainable development, and fortifying multilateralism. I eagerly expect the active integration of the communique into the G20 agenda, propelling progress to enhance the lives of the urban citizens worldwide. I also look forward to exemplary leadership of our mayors to ensure the effective implementation of the U20 communique, attracting active citizens' participation, contribute to the resolution of the urban challenges, and drive the advancement of our member cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, for sharing a few of the many things that Seoul is doing and also for wholeheartedly supporting the joint declaration. I now turn to our next speaker, Borough Mayor Lalonde. We've heard what cities can do and how we can work together as cities. But there is a huge challenge that remains, which is funding. What are the existing financing sources available to cities to fund the critical work city leaders are delivering on the ground? And what is your perspective on potential new sources of funding?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. I just want to start by saying that I will not give you a super secret about funding today. I think we are all facing the same issues, and I will not give you the secret recipe to print more money. But I can just share with you what we are working on in Montreal to help us achieve our ambitious goals regarding climate change and the resilience of our urban cities. So the City of Montreal in 2001 developed a strategic vision for a more resilient, supportive, and inclusive city that is committed with conviction to the necessary ecological transition. And then we adopted a climate plan with 46 actions that are already all in March. So all of the 46 actions are started yet. And with this plan, we aim obviously to accelerate the adaptation for more sustainable modes of transportation, reduce the use of fossil fuels in buildings, and enhance green our environment. And we want to reduce food waste as well. But one of the first things that we wrote in this plan was the importance of mobilizing the citizens and all the ecosystem of Montreal. So the citizens, but also the businesses and the NGOs and everybody in Montreal. And this is something that is really key to our model here in Montreal. Because like many other cities, when we want to finance ecological transition, we rely a lot on subsidies that help us, of course, but that are not sufficient to achieve our big objectives. So we have to try to work on other sectors to help us to get enough funding. So the first thing that we do in Montreal, and I'm pretty sure other cities are doing it as well, is we use our money wisely. So we, in the climate plan, but it's a climate plan, I'm sorry, it got lost in translation. We aim to allocate 10 to 15% of our capital work program in natural and innovative infrastructure. So this is really something that we are working since a few years, and we want to increase the capital work that are going to natural and innovative infrastructure. We think it's really key to build new infrastructure that are going to make our cities more resilient, but also make us save on money in the future by if we still doing the same infrastructure that we did before. So we think that we have to change the way we do our infrastructure regarding, for example, just the water issues. We also launched a month ago the circular economy roadmap. So we really want to work on different economic sectors like fabric, logistic, food system, construction, plastic, to make sure that we are more circular in our economy. So we accompany the businesses that want to do this change. Right now, it's about 3% of our economy that is circular. By 2050, we want to achieve 17%. So we are going to work with all the businesses and other partners. We also launched, not a long time ago, responsible purchasing plan. So as the city, we purchase a lot of different things. So we want to make sure that we offer goods and services that contribute to the city's ecological transition as well as a city. And as I mentioned before, the mobilization of the ecosystem is really important, is really key for us. So when we, just when we started working on our climate plan, we also work with the ecosystem to create the Montreal Climate Partnership. It's an independent collaborative initiative. This initiative brings together nearly 100 organizations from economic, associative, philanthropic, trade union, and institutional sectors. So it's a lot of people that gathers together and that agrees with the objective of our climate plan. Yes, I said it right, this one. And they started 2 years ago. We had 2 summits, and the last one, it was around, well, with those 2 summits, we gathered more than 1,400 participants and 200 panelists, experts on different topics, and we have 15 new ambitious commitments that were provided with our partners during those 2 summits in the past year. So we really want all the ecosystem to work with us and invest their money in our collective objectives. We also work with the federal government creating the Climate Fund. The Climate Fund is a regional institution that invests in low carbon solution in the greater Montreal, so Montreal and 82 other cities around Montreal, well, 82 with Montreal. They collaborate with key stakeholders from the private, public, non-profit sectors, and they bring together ideas and opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emission and bring urban resilience. So we, with the federal government and the Fondation Trottier, it's a really huge foundation regarding environment in Montreal, we helped invested in the foundation of this new fund. And as we all know too well, economic activity, the financial sectors has an essential role to play in addressing the crisis we are facing, so the loss of biodiversity, the plastic pollution, and the climate change. So they have a role to play in that, and today a dominant proportion of global financial flows support activities that harm rather than protect nature. So finance aiming to create positive outcomes for nature represents a small fraction of overall flows. There is insufficient consideration in final policies and decision making of the need to protect, regenerate, and make sustainable use of nature. This is why when Montreal hosted the COP15 in December 2022, we work with Finance Montreal, which is a crossroad of finance players that join their forces together in Montreal to make sure that we are competitive and we prosperous as well. And they co-organized an emblematic day at the COP15 that was called Finance and Biodiversity Day. And together, they all partner in the development of the high-level roadmap, aligning financial flows with the coming Montreal Global Diversity Framework. So they are working together to make sure that financial sector would have a role that is increasing in the next years to make sure that that we can achieve all those goals. And they are working right now on Quebec, Montreal, with Finance Montreal, a delegation to go in Cali to start having face-to-face real discussion on the impact of the financial sector and how they can get more involved in the commitment, the agreement target that we had during the COP15. So, so this is the kind of action that we are taking in Montreal to make sure that we are able to faces those three crises I mentioned before. So we use our money wisely, but we try to use other money wisely as well.
Thank you very much, Borough Mayor Lalonde. And I think you have touched on issues that are certainly dear to many cities here, such as the need to work with other levels of government for other monies to be spent wisely. But also something that is very interesting that I took a note of is the work towards the budget, connecting the Climate Action Plan to a budget. I know some cities here, like New York, London, and others like Mumbai have released a climate budget, which, and also Montreal, and we see this as a very positive and important movement towards unifying the Climate Action Plan with monetary and budgetary decisions. I now turn to our final speaker, Deputy Mayor Singh of Brampton. Another critical aspect of sustainable development is housing. Adequate housing is critical in ensuring a sustainable, livable, and resilient future for city residents. What are some innovative perspectives on sustainable and adequate housing that you could share with us today?
Thank you, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you to Rio and Sao Paulo for hosting us. Thank you to the Urban 20 as well. Housing is very, very important, especially in the GTN city of Brampton. We have a huge immigration policy from the federal government, which requires successive housing at the municipal level. So housing has become an important issue for the government of Ontario, and particularly the city of Brampton. So some things we're doing at the city of Brampton in particular is affordable housing. We have partnerships with private developers who are getting loans from the Canadian Mortgage ACMHC Housing Corporation. It's a federal entity that provides loans over a 50-year period with the friendly amortization period. So nonprofits or private developers can apply for that type of funding. We have in the city of Brampton nonprofits applying for that funding. We have places of worship, so churches, temples, who are getting into affordable housing, applying for that funding. And then we have private developers as well. And the criteria is simple. A proportion of the development has to be 80% below market value. And when you get into regional funding, we have a federal government, a provincial government, a regional government, and a city government. That funding, affordability has to be 60% market value. So funding is very critical when it comes to housing and affordable housing. Our federal government provides loans at favorable terms. We have long-term care homes. We have 3 long-term care homes coming in the city of Brampton, and so those are for elderly where they're too sick to take care of themselves. They have medical expertise in those type of units, and it's for more end of life. That also comes from our provincial partners who once again provide loans to build those type of facilities. Lastly, related to climate change and integrating affordable housing, 2 last things. One is at the City of Brampton. We're working on a community energy and emissions reduction plan. So 80% of the current inventory in the City of Brampton, because it was built over 40, 50 years ago, requires to be retrofit. As you know, Canada can get quite cold. Not as cold as Montreal, but it can get quite cold. And heat consumption and heat, the technology used previously was not friendly, environmentally friendly. So we're working with our neighboring municipalities and our provincial federal partners to come with the energy retrofit program, because those emissions are hurting our ability to meet targets in the near future. Secondly, and something we're extremely proud of, is we're doing a river walk program. So the river walk, so our downtown core at the City of Brampton has been hindered from development for many years because it has a special policy, because it floods a lot. And so obviously when in the past, when infrastructure was built, you know, these type of storms were coming once every 100 years. Now we all know they come much more often. We're looking at once every decade. So there we have a way to route the water. It's a $140 million project. That also comes from our federal partners and our provincial partners. And that will unlock, and we're very close. We've secured the federal funding, which is our national government. We're waiting to secure the provincial funding. That will open up 30,000 units of residential units over a 10-year period. So that's very, very important. And so there are strong linkages between affordable housing and climate change and sustainable development that sometimes aren't as highlighted as they should be. And all the development we have coming on the pipeline now has to meet certain criteria. So we have our building codes, we have our federal building code, but at the City of Brampton, we also have a ranking system. So it goes from bronze, silver, gold, and every few years, and developers always complain, the silver becomes a bronze, and the gold becomes a silver, and then it's made much more stringent. And we enforce, especially when it comes to affordable housing, because they're getting funding, at least silvers and golds. They can't just get away with bronze. And that includes making sure the developments are walkable, looking at heat pumps, looking at the building materials. So we work with the developers to meet those targets. So indeed, we support affordable housing. We're trying to make it happen. Everybody's trying to make it happen, to everybody's credit. But the most important thing, and which I think the City of Brampton, we support the communique so much this time in particular, is because of the reference to financing and funding. Whether that's from your federal governments, your national governments, whether it's from international organizations, whether it's from the private sector. I always say in the City of Brampton, we're really good at making plans with beautiful pictures and diagrams. But you know, we've had these on the books for 20 years. And because nothing was being funded. We have very limited tools in municipalities for revenue. We have property tax, which is 75% of our revenue, and 25% comes from user fees. And try raising user fees, you'll get some serious backlash. So it's that funding piece that is so vital to get many of our infrastructure projects, your infrastructure projects off the ground. So we appreciate the communique referencing that, being robust in that, and advocating that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and it's also inspiring to see how housing, which is a point that was commonly raised as a critical point for all of our cities, is seen holistically in Brampton with climate, but also with a strong socioeconomic component, of course, but with the power that the cities have as procurers and drivers of the market in that case, by creating standards that get updated, which is important, at a very, hopefully, short amounts of time to really move the market to go further in their climate targets. With that, I will now open the floor to comments from the audience. Please note that we don't have so much time, so unfortunately we will not have time to questions for our speakers, but we would like to hear from you, from some of you at least here in the room, in case you have some reflections to share with us. Please keep your remarks short, as we only have a few minutes left. If you'd like to share a comment, please just raise your hand. I will call you, and you can either use the mic in front of you, or we can give a roving mic to your location. Tuane?
Yeah, thanks, Chairperson of the session. One of the questions that I always battle with, and maybe colleagues in the room can also help us to understand, is the issue around when we talk about just energy transition from fossil fuel to what we would then term as green energy. A city such as ours, or a country such as ours, where we are deemed to be a developing a country, one of the biggest questions that I always grapple with is how do we ensure that we continue with our developmental goals, which will require serious energy and serious base load energy. What I am seeing currently globally is that countries such as ours are being incentivized to move away from coal to green energy. You know, would get funding, would be given money, you must transition from this energy to that energy. But how do we, as countries of our nature, keep our developmental goals and ensure that people get out of the poverty line that we also were discussing as part of our first priorities? How do we move to that? Because it's something that I really battle with, you know. Because without energy, you cannot talk industrialization. Without base load energy, you cannot talk development, you cannot talk employment. What we are doing instead, we are throwing money, keeping people in what we call state dependency, which is your social grants, your social welfare, and not really developing countries such as developing countries. So maybe my question is twofold. How do we ensure developmental for developing countries through just energy transition? There is a word here as part of our communique, which it really boiled me a bit, because it talks about accelerating progress towards phasing out of fossil fuel. And you know, the word accelerate means now we are in a haste, like we must move now, but we talk about just transition. So how do you accelerate while you are being just? For me, it's a contradiction. And maybe we need to reword this to something that is more palatable to just transition and not just accelerate. But I'm just putting it out there, and maybe colleagues could help me to grapple with this phenomenon of transitioning while developing.
Thank you for your comment. Hopefully, numbers from organizations such as the IEA show that prices for renewable energy have been dropping, which can definitely help in the short term, and also distributed energy especially generates more jobs than a lot of the fossil fuels. So although it may not be a short-term feasibility, it's a process, and I believe that is the idea of accelerating this process, but always, of course, as you say, bearing in mind the needs to ensure the developmental goals and green job creation in your cities and countries. Moving forward, New York.
Thank you so much, and thank you, colleague, for bringing that question up. It is something that, as a city in New York City, we also grapple with. Because what we found is that when we have climate emergencies, it is oftentimes our brown and brown communities, as well as our low-income communities that are heavily impacted. But we also see that the benefits of a just energy transition is not necessarily going towards those communities either. And what we've been able to do in New York City is to actually shift our strategy when we think about energy and climate and transitioning to renewable energy to include climate justice as a center of our work, meaning that we want to make sure that those communities that were not looked at, those communities that continue to suffer from our inability to do the right thing, are actually given direct benefits. So in New York City, we started working with Latino communities, African American communities, to help them get jobs in the green economy, to train them about the climate impact that is going to happen to them, but also to give them a voice at the table. So you are indeed correct that it is a bit of a conundrum sometimes when we're saying that we want to accelerate our efforts, but also we want it to be just. But it really starts from looking at those that have been negatively impacted the most and bringing them to the table and enabling them to have a voice. With that said, it does not mean that we stop our efforts, right? Because the planet is also suffering, and it is not going to wait for us to figure out our dynamics and the biases that we have. So we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. But again, climate justice really is a thing that we have seen in New York City as being a really incredible way to bring everyone at the table, especially those that have been marginalized in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. And indeed, we've been seeing that climate justice is required for any scalable action at city level, be it in Barcelona, which also addresses the issue of energy poverty very strongly, to policies like the one mentioned in New York and others. Any further comments?
There's just a small comment just to emphasize the issue around the notion that the just transition must be just. And I think as municipalities and everyone in the world, we need to acknowledge that, especially we coming from Africa. For the longest of time, our resources have been exploited by others. And therefore, those that became richer as a result of our resources, to ensure that this transition is just, they have a responsibility to pay. And I think that notion, we must never walk away from it, precisely because we have to ensure that the just transition itself takes into account people, it takes into account jobs, the economy, and the environment. You'd realize that if South Africa was to immediately move away from coal, it will result in joblessness, and a lot of people will therefore be pushed into poverty. So that transition needs to ensure that it is just, so that those that have taken our resources also contribute towards ensuring that we have a just transition that takes into account what I've just mentioned. Lastly, noting that indeed hard decisions have to be made. That is why it is also important that constantly we remind the world that this just transition must be just. Otherwise, should we lose the sense of informing the world that this just transition needs to link up to sustainable development, trying to link the people and the planet, who then have lost the plot, especially as developing countries. That would be my contribution to the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much. This is indeed the part, I think, of the Paris Agreement, the one part that we're missing the most, which is financing, based on this precise notion that the ones who have least to contribute to the crisis are the ones that are suffering the most, and hence they should receive more financial support for solutions to mitigate and adapt. Ahmedabad.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the chairman of U20, Mr. Ricardo Nunes, Mayor of Sao Paulo, and Mr. Eduardo Paes, Mayor of Rio de Janeiro, for hosting a successful 7th U20 cycle. I would also like to welcome representatives of global conveners, mayors from different cities around the world, and all dignitaries. we at Ahmedabad call out for investment in renewable energy, focusing on distributed generation, guaranteeing access to everyone sustainable, accessible, and affordable energy. We are glad to see this as one of this year's priorities. We at Ahmedabad have recognized various bottlenecks in our energy users and identified gaps in various sectors where sustainable practice and energy savings through technologies can be implemented. Our transportation model is known countrywide. Our dependency on fossil fuel has led to environmental degradation and climate change. Renewable energy offers a sustainable solution, harnessing the power of wind, solar, hydro, and other natural resources. By embracing renewable, we not only mitigate the impacts of climate change, but also foster economic growth, create jobs, and ensure energy security. AMC has installed total 21 megawatt of wind power plant and 7 megawatt of solar power plant system till date. With this total 28 megawatt renewable installation, around 268 million unity electricity have been generated and around rupees 186 crore energy bill have been reduced so far. Through total 28 megawatt of RE carbon footprint of 2,46,933 tons of carbon dioxide release has been avoided. This year, AMC has proposed 50 megawatt of renewable projects through which annually 114 million units clean energy will be generated, which will save approximately rate 70 crore per annum, and through total 50 megawatt new renewable projects, carbon footprint of 1,04,880 tons of carbon dioxide will be avoided. Hence, I conclude by requesting all of us to commit for future powered by clean, renewable energy for the well-being of current and future generations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments and for the great work in Ahmedabad. And we have time for one last comment, if there are any. Amsterdam.
Thank you to all the conveners, and thank you also for those who introduced this session, because we also need some good news now and then. I would like to point out to you that Amsterdam was lucky to receive 5 million euros from Europe for a fund to actually enhance the climate and living conditions of the Amsterdammers in one of the poorest districts in the city. So it's hugely going to contribute to what's been rightly mentioned around this table, climate justice, and to make sure that all the measures that are needed will not only benefit those who can actually afford to take the measures, but also those who cannot. So it's both addressing the financial issue as well as the climate issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I definitely agree. We all need good news, especially when we hear about climate. So congratulations on getting that fund and moving forward. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all for taking the time to join us for this session, especially our panelists, and for sharing your valuable contributions, members of the meeting. This meeting will be closed before I we finish, I would just like to mention we now have a quick break, 15-minute break, and the next session is downstairs at the auditorium, 3rd floor. So I'll see you guys in a few minutes, and thank you all.